Why? Why are you talking to me today?
Well, I took a leap and thought, I've got a very unusual life. Let's see how this goes.
Okay. Well, I mean, the first thing I'm going to ask you is about yourself. Just to tell me about yourself. Wherever you want to start.
Okay. Well, you're interviewing me in a garden, in a museum,
Yeah.
in Worcestershire.
Yeah. Lovely, isn't it?
It's lovely.
I got a real shock coming here. I've never been here and it's beautiful.
Well, this is near where I grew up in Kidderminster.
Right.
So I've been up there
Mm-hmm.
visiting my family.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a really important reference point for me, this little bit of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I've come to appreciate it in middle age.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've been on a little journey in life in recent years, totally unrelated to politics, all to do with emotional maturity, everything to do with getting healthy and thinking about the world more deeply. And when I really am at peace, it's when I'm walking down by the River Severn in Worcestershire,
Mm-hmm.
in the place where I grew up,
Mm-hmm.
and learnt about the world.
Mm-hmm. Nevertheless, that isn't the entire story of you, Tom, because you obviously also have thrived, in the past at least, on quite a lot of controversy and excitement. But before we get into any of that, tell me about your family.
Okay.
Are your mum and dad still alive?
They're still alive. They
Mm-hmm.
separated when I was 10 or 11.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a brother, a sister and a half-sister.
So at school, did you do well? Were you a good boy? Do your homework?
I was a bit of a rebel at school. I was bright at school, but I didn't really prosper academically. I think in my teens I was quite driven. You know, in the 80s when you were a teenager, you would, music, culture, politics were much more mixed. And
Yeah.
I mean, how I look at this now, and I don't sort of, this isn't a critical thing of the place I grew up, but I grew up in a small town in the 1980s in Thatcher's Britain, where there were kids that left school from my age cohort who didn't get jobs for 5 years because
Yeah.
long-term unemployment in young
Yeah.
people was
Yeah.
very common. I fought against it. I wanted greater opportunity, and ended up going to London, moved down and lived in a bedsit with a kid I was at school with.
That's quite a brave thing to do.
It didn't seem like it at the time.
Okay.
It seemed like freedom.
Right.
And he got a job making sandwiches in Paddington Station, and I got offered 2 jobs on the same day: a clerical assistant in the Department for the Environment and Transport and a trainee library assistant in the Labour Party library. And I took the Labour Party job, obviously, and loved every minute of it.
Did it feel like you were finding out about a new family or something?
I was certainly, the world was making itself clear to me. I was beginning to understand the world around me a bit more. But it took me a long time to get there. I mean, I think what I now think I spent 30 years doing was being a reactionary. I think I rebelled against growing up in a small town, a little bit parochial, not a lot of opportunity. But when I got to London, I think I was rebelling against sneering middle-class metropolitan elites who thought I was a small-town kid from a parochial town in the Midlands, which I was. And it was only relatively recently that I've come to the view that I don't need to react to anything anymore, that actually what I can do is live a purposeful and positive life.
You describe yourself as a reactionary, as though you're somebody who has in the past found yourself reacting to things and feeling very deeply.
Yes. Yes, I think that when I say reactionary, I mean I was reacting to
Yeah.
events.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
I was driven
Yeah.
by the need to prove myself,
Mm.
and for all sorts of reasons. And I'm very pleased to say I've managed to shake that off, because it was a heavy burden for a long time that I didn't know I was carrying. And it's great not to feel that way.
I was thinking about you on the journey here, and I was thinking, well, you know, actually, even by most politicians' standards, you've kind of been involved in quite a lot of controversy. There's lots of moments of kind of like, ooh, you know, whether it's back in the sort of Blair years or whether it's most recently, you've been at the centre of upsets and difficult moments, and I don't know how it's felt like to you, that, or whether that's not how it's felt to you.
Well, it depends on which controversy or which difficult moment you're talking about. There have certainly been moments where I've genuinely felt under very great pressure.
Yeah, I think I don't know how you cope with that.
Well, I mean, actually now, I think I cope with it very well. When I was first elected, first of all, I was elected quite young at 34.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of men don't really mature until later in life. But I think I was a particularly emotionally immature 34-year-old. So I was a little bit reflexive and knee-jerk. And I look back now and I would wear my heart on my sleeve more than I should, I think. I've probably got more worries now. I sometimes worry that I'm too chilled out for politics these days. And I don't quite know how I've ended up here, but it's a very joyous place to be.
Well, thinking about Brexit, we're all pretty stirred up by it, it seems to me. I don't know. I mean, maybe actually we're not all as stirred up as sometimes the media is showing, because sometimes I think that there's a lot of people who are really going about their daily business and have kind of moved on, but there is a lot of heat in that.
Yeah.
Are you saying that you don't feel that heat anymore, Tom?
No, I know the seriousness of Brexit, although I do put it in perspective, both current and historical. I mean, Brexit is a very difficult, complex, national and international problem facing the country. And it requires all politicians to give a little, right? They need to soften their position, not harden their position. And, you know, sometimes in the position I find myself in, I've spoken out on what I think needs to be done in a way that causes a little bit of judders in the ether of my own party. But you've got to say what you think's right. And if you say it in a way that isn't condemnatory of other people's position, or, you know, understands where people are coming from, then ultimately I think you can make progress.
In relation to, I mean, because, you know, people say things about you that at times you've been, I don't know, too forceful, that, you know, you've been associated with pushing people about. My experience is that people who get themselves in that situation often are driven by a feeling that they're fighting the good fight, that they're not necessarily being destructive, that they feel that they're fighting for something that really matters. So if you think about back in, you know, the Blair years and times when you were seen as being sometimes quite aggressive, did you feel inside that you were fighting the good fight?
Well, I've always felt driven by a sense of mission. I think decoding your question, you're saying, is there a sort of binary world I lived in of right and wrong?
Yeah, a bit, yeah.
That's
really helpful that you've put it like that.
I guess in those days, in those days I was more certain of right and wrong, but now I'm older, I can reflect and realise there's nuance in all
Absolutely,
areas
yeah.
of life.
Yeah. In my world, what I'm dealing with on a day-to-day basis is people in states of certainty,
Yeah.
and believing certain things. And part of what I have to do is try and help them open up a bit more uncertainty and a kind of reflective space inside themselves. But one of the most difficult things is around the issue of abuse, that where people have been hurt in that way, or where people are working with people who've been hurt in that way, it's very difficult not to get into those binary states of mind. It's kind of endemic to that.
Yeah.
And I wondered whether, this whole thing that's erupted around the Carl Beach situation, whether you've been able to think about that and how something has erupted where there's perhaps been binary states of mind and a lack of perhaps capacity for uncertainty.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously with Coal Beach and the whole issue of institutional child abuse and historic child abuse, I've had cause to think about that very deeply over many, many years.
Yeah.
And I try to remain calm in the face of a sort of media storm right now about it. And, because this is a sort of 5 or 6 year journey.
Absolutely.
And certainly in the early days of these inquiries, it was very difficult to deal with the many hundreds of allegations, that almost like a Blue Peter sack of post in my office.
I can imagine.
And so I had to put in place systems that I've never sort of had to deal with before, how you share information with the police, and how my staff record phone calls and all that kind of stuff on a very limited budget. So that was quite traumatic. And what I learned, but I did early on, I really did, even back then when I was sort of more intense, I understood I couldn't get too close to the people making the allegations. Right? I'm not like you, I'm not professionally trained, I'm not an investigator.
No.
And so I tried to sort of form almost a script by which, if people rang in, we'd say, our role is this, it's the police are doing this investigation, and we try and signpost into support services. So early on there was nowhere to send people if they needed counselling, for example. No. And so we had to go and talk to the NSPCC and work out a protocol for them phoning the NSPCC line and all of that. So I understand the point you're making, and I think you're probably going to ask me, did I get too close to it?
Well, I that would be a kind of question. I don't know how you wouldn't get too close to it when people are telling you about the most appalling kind of pain that they've been through.
Yes.
I mean, I think it's very difficult not to be affected.
Yes.
That's why my profession, we have supervision and all sorts of ways of managing the feelings that get stirred up in us.
Yeah.
Politicians, don't.
I think the hardest thing was where, talking to men of a similar age to me, where they'd buried their experience. And then because of the media attention on the project, the door had opened, it had been unlocked for them in a way that they weren't either ready to go through or I remember, none of this is in the public domain, but there's one particular person who was a witness, and I had very great concern for him, and then I thought, what is the you're in a sort of dilemma about what is the right thing to do.
And what's your role?
Certainly, certainly, what is your role? Or actually, more fundamental than that, am I capable of fulfilling the expectations on me by a lot of competing interests here? And where do my responsibilities lie?
Yeah.
And I mean, right now I'm in the middle of a storm where people question my motive. And 10 years ago, that would have really eaten away at me. Now, I think I feel more settled in myself, so that doesn't eat away at me.
It's amazing because you'd have to be pretty Teflon coated not to feel a bit upset.
I do. I know it sounds amazing, but it is true. They don't get to me anymore. I guess I've been. I am in a fairly brutal world.
You are.
And I think I've just found a way of dealing with the turmoil of it.
Obviously, there are a lot of people who are very upset and angry and feel that something has happened to them that essentially is actually, they feel they've been abused. So the dynamic of somebody's abused has got into the whole thing. But I wondered if you felt quite sad about that now.
I hate to see people in pain, and I genuinely feel very deeply for the people that have had injustices done to them as a result of the failed police inquiries. I really do, and I understand why they're angry, and I understand why some of their anger is targeted at me, and I don't want people to feel sorry for me, but I don't want people to question my motives either. I did my best, and that's all you can do in life. So I'm genuinely very, very sorry that the inquiries didn't go the way they did. And I just say, I genuinely was trying to do the right thing.
Yeah. I'm quite interested in this sort of sense that you've gone from being somebody who could get quite sort of stirred up and was a bit of a kind of scrapper to somebody who's sort of like Mr. Chill, and what that process is and how you understand that.
Yeah. I kind of, I don't know, I don't completely know why this has happened. There's things I've done that I think have really contributed to it, and actually some of it is nutritional. I think you can change your mental health and your cognitive state through nutrition, and that's an amazing thing. I was very overweight. It was debilitating. I couldn't love my kids in the way that I wanted to. I couldn't run about with them. I was, and I got to the point where, I really did read all these biographies of my, predecessors in the Labour Party, and they all died in their 50s.
Right.
So I felt I was going to die.
That's a big
which is
thing.
A big motivator.
Yeah, it is.
And if anything's going to stop you eating Kit Kats, it's the sense that it's going to kill you.
So we resolve Brexit and we have a general election. You may not get re-elected, is what I've been told, that you could face some serious challenge in your constituency. Do you think, well, what will I do if that happens? What would I do next?
No, but I'm obviously not anticipating losing. I like to win elections, and in a lot of it, people said I was under fire last time and I could lose. You can always lose an election, but would it be the end of my world if I did lose? No, certainly not. But I don't want to lose, so I think there's more I want to do.
That thing of having to go through an election every, whatever, year or 4 years or whatever, how does that, I mean, that must, like people generally of your experience and age don't have to stand up and have everybody decide whether they keep their job or not. I mean, it's just, I know we're going to, it's the right thing to do, but still it's quite a...
They're quite good fun elections. I quite enjoy them. I mean, the prospect of them is more ominous than the actuality. And remember, I first got involved in a general election for Harold Wilson in February 1974 at the age of 7. So it's kind of in the rhythm of my life, really.
Right.
I mean, I played different roles. So I like them. I like the crack with people. I like the excitement
sort of camaraderie.
Yeah, and you have some great conversations.
Yeah.
In fact, in the May elections this year, we had local elections in West Bromwich. It was quite good fun, mainly because most people asked me about weight loss rather than Brexit or Jeremy Corbyn or the future of the Labour Party.
That's interesting.
And so when you've been elected for a time, you get to know your constituents very, very well, and you know the areas very well, and they kind of get to know you a bit as well. So, when you've got that level of familiarity, it's more rewarding than people think.
Okay.
And it's like catching up with old friends, really.
You're in a Labour Party that I'm not sure is the Labour Party you joined, and certainly not the Labour Party of 10 years ago. Do you still belong in it, really?
Whether I belong in the Labour Party or not is actually irrelevant. The Labour Party is in me. It is who I am. It's in my DNA. And, some days it feels like a curse. Some days it feels like a gift. But it is in me. And those values that were sort of given me in childhood, that sort of sense that it's only the vehicle that is the Labour Party has given opportunity to millions of people. We're over the last century. I think it's still the greatest vehicle for social change this country's ever had. I'm the temporary deputy leader, and it's I've got to do everything I can to hold this institution together in good times and bad. And whilst these days...
heroic?
Well, I was about to say, whilst these days, even at the end of the day, I Google second-hand camper vans for sale, and I think of that little river view with a flask of tea and a quieter life. There's still a lot I've got to do, and we've got to get a Labour government. I feel very responsible bringing on the next generation of change makers in the country, and then maybe I can put my feet up.
Do you think you'll put your feet up? I mean, I could imagine you being a kind of chief exec of big charity, doing lots of campaigning, and I could imagine you in lots of different roles.
If I did anything outside politics, I'm just training to be a level 2 gym instructor.
Are you?
So if I do that, I want to be able to run and keep active. I was serious about what I said earlier. I want to live another 51 years, at least. I want to live a purposeful and positive life, and I want to make change every day of it. And that means staying physically active. And if it means me joining a gym and dealing with all those fat blokes I went to school with 30 years ago, then so be it.
Thank you very much for talking to me, Tom. That was really interesting, and I hope it was okay for you too.
Lovely to meet you.